Good afternoon and welcome to the 231st episode of the Georgia Farm Bureau Georgia Prep Sports Drive for the GHSA State Title. Today, our featured guest is going to be Jason Longshore. He is a soccer commentator, and he probably went to more GHSA games this year than anyone, and he is going to break down what he saw at the state championships, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what impressed him and what stood out. We did talk last week to Chambly's head coach after their incredible season, and I was just blown away with how much talent they're going to have returning next year and just how high profile a lot of these girls are already getting ready to compete. I think with the Jamaican national team, have girls scoring 4 goals a game. It's just amazing how much talent is in Georgia right now. So after we're joined by him, we'll break down all the soccer results, and then we'll get into the track and field sectionals, some standouts from this past weekend, and then we'll talk about the baseball state playoffs and everything else spring. Do we have Jason yet? Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me on again. I appreciate it.
Yes, it's a real pleasure. So first question, just how many GHSA games did you get to go to this season in your estimation?
I lost track somewhere along the way. I ended up doing the 1A, D1, the 3A, the 5A, and the 7A finals for both boys and girls. That was a blast over this past week. And then with my Soccer Down Here show and podcast, we ended up doing probably around 12 to 15 dates. And a lot of those, we did the doubleheader of the boys and the girls games with radio calls. So we made the rounds pretty well. We tried to get outside the metro area where we could as well and see some of these programs that are popping up. I mean, I think the biggest thing that stands out to me about this season is, traditionally we've looked at the metro Atlanta area for soccer, where this year you had 3 teams from the Athens area that were in the state championships on the boys and girls sides. Gainesville represented really well, especially through Johnson, one of the best teams in the state. Dalton, obviously. Bremen gets to a state title game for the first time. So it's not just Metro Atlanta in soccer anymore. It's really fascinating to see this growth statewide. It's awesome.
Yes, and one of those teams, obviously, Oconee County sent both to the state championships. North Oconee, though, they ended up falling short to Westminster. You mentioned the Athens area. I think North Oconee, what they've been doing across athletics is really something, and I've said that they look to me like they're going to be the next Buford, and that area is obviously blowing up. So what do you think has been the driving force to the success in that area?
I think the biggest thing, as you see it school to school, is when you get schools that have a feeder program in soccer, and look, you have the club system, which is growing, and that's a huge part of it. The quality of coaching around the state has improved. It's not just parents rolling a ball out anymore at the youngest ages. There's really good instruction about building those foundational technical skills. And the game's more tactical than it's ever been, too. You're getting to the point with high school teams that are playing pretty complex systems. And it's tough because you're cramming a lot of games into a short period of time. So the number one thing for me is the level of coaching. 2 is the growth of the club game around these different pockets of the state, so the players get to play outside of the school system. But 3, it's those feeder programs. And I think the schools that are working with their local middle schools and creating that culture to bring players all the way through and understand what it means to play for North Oconee or Oconee County. Athens Academy is another good one on the girls' side. To really create that culture and represent your school and start it even before they get there, I think those are the schools that are having the most success across the state.
Yeah, and you probably saw Johnson Gainesville play a few times this
Yeah.
season. Is that right?
I got them one time. I called the game against Gainesville, their crosstown rivalry. Had them last year when they hosted Dalton as well. It's a program I've followed for a while now because I've called them in state championship games over the years. For me, that was the best team in the state on the boys' side all year long across all classifications. Incredible team, incredible talents. Jorge Sandoval, probably the player of the year on the boys' side in the state.
Yes, and it looks like he had a really solid goal in that game. You were talking about
Yeah.
the tactics. Were you at the 4A state championship game?
I wasn't. I was on the other side of it with NFHS, so we were in Mercer and Duluth. Johnson, it feels like I've missed out on them these past couple of years and seeing them in state championship games, but they are you bring up tactics, and this is a team that is really well coached by Frank Zamora, and I think they're one of the teams that is one of the most interesting to watch because they have the talent. And in the past, I think it was easy to out talent teams. And if you just had more talent, you could just keep it simple and beat teams. But now you've got to have some tactical wrinkles. And for me, the way Johnson in the midfield can control games with players that, aren't the biggest. And a lot of times in high school soccer, the physicality is a big part of who wins and who doesn't. Johnson doesn't have a ton of size. I think in general, they're probably one of the smaller teams of the better ones, but the way that they were able to control the midfield and dominate play there just gave them such a foundation to get forward with numbers and win games.
Yeah, and Westminster, Najee interviewed their head coach. They talked about how important defense is. They're really well coached. It talks about gathering intel on their opponents and strategizing. So, I mean, I'm just looking at it in that game. Johnson Gainesville, the defending champs, they get a 2-0 lead. Westminster strikes back, but it's, as you said, Jorge Sandoval kind of being that leader. He's a senior, so do you know what his future in soccer is looking like?
I believe he's committed to North Georgia. I think there's a few of the Knights who are headed up to North Georgia, which is a program on the rise, and that's where the trickle up effect starts to happen, is on the college side, and it's not just going to be the Georgia States and the Mercers on the men's side at D1. It's going to be the North Georgias, the Clayton States, even the D3s. I mean, Oglethorpe and Emory are both recruiting a number of local players now. Emory had quite a few from teams that I saw over this past week. Turner McInnes from Walton probably will move straight into the back line for Emory. He's that good, and he can walk in as a freshman and play. So you see this to where now these players who are emerging at different schools around the state, they have somewhere to go. And Sandoval, somebody who has been kind of with Atlanta United's academy as well, played with their U19s. It's hard being in Gainesville and trying to get to Marietta for training every day. But they've kept tabs on him, and he's been part of their U19, so he's going to have a chance to continue to develop in college, and we see what happens.
Nice. And is he a guy that, I mean, he's already, I guess, matured to that stage where he is going to college, but would you say he's past the point where if he would have gotten involved in the academy earlier, or is there that opportunity once he's in college to still have a chance to continue that career?
Yeah, there's that opportunity for sure. And if it's not Atlanta United, and that's the other thing about the growth of soccer in the Southeast, it might be South Georgia Tormenta down in Statesboro, which is a third division professional team, but they won a championship last year. It might be Chattanooga FC or Chattanooga Red Wolves, Greenville Triumph, Birmingham Legion, all teams in the second and third divisions. Savannah Clovers, another professional team new to the state this year. All professional teams where guys can make a living at this game and move up the ladder. And we're seeing that movement happen across the soccer landscape. But even from an Atlanta United perspective, Machop Chol is a prime example of someone who wasn't ready when their high school time ended, and he went to college and he played 4 years at Wake Forest, and he grew physically. And I think that's maybe one of the things for Sandoval is to the physical side of his game. If he can get a little more explosive, work maybe in the weight room, maybe it's strength and conditioning, maybe it's that explosive first step, because technique, he's got it. He's got an amazing left foot, but it's that next step to get to the professional level. And a lot of times college coaches and the access you have to the training side of it off the field can really have a huge impact on players.
Yep, and if you're saying he's perhaps the most impressive player, I will take your word for it. Let's talk about 7A, though. You had mentioned Oconee County having a strong run, but in 7A it was Forsyth County this time. Denmark, they beat Walton. Lambert, they beat Walton on the boys' side. What do you see from those programs and helping to put Forsyth County on the map?
I mean, it was heartbreaking for Walton, first off. Both games go to overtime, both games go to penalties, and they can't get the win in either one. Really good seasons for the Walton program on both sides. But Forsyth County is another area to watch, and I had a chance to see Denmark's boys earlier in the year when they went on the road in the first round of the playoffs and beat Osborne, which was a really surprising result. And they got through on penalties, a brilliant save from Austin Bender in that one. Collins Hill ended up knocking them out in the next round, but the girls get all the way through to the final. And this was such an impressive team from Denmark. Their center back, Mary Beth McLaughlin, was, to me, the player of the game in the championship game, just shutting everything down. And at center back, a lot of times you'll see them just stay in the middle, just really hold their position, and McLaughlin didn't play that way. She was sliding out wide, picked her spots to clean things up there, and would also step into the attack when opportunities presented themselves. So McLaughlin was the most impressive for me. Maddie Stoddard as well up top. 5'2", I think, Stoddard, but she's so quick and really strong. She used her body really well to kind of draw contact with the defender and then spin off and take off. She moved up top in the game and had some opportunities. I know Maddie's headed to Auburn. I'm not sure about McLaughlin off the top of my head, but Denmark, in a game where you probably look at it and you think Walton's going to be the favorite there, Denmark was able to handle their business, and they get to the shootout, and a freshman goalkeeper made two huge saves. Di Bartolo, two big saves and almost a third, which is basically unheard of in a penalty shootout. You get one save out of the goalkeeper, you're really happy. Two, it's dreamland, and to almost get the third that would have won the state title that was then converted on the next kick for Denmark. So impressive. The other side of it, the boys' side with Lambert, that was a wild game. Back and forth. Lambert took a 2-1 lead. Walton came back to take a 3-2 lead. It's looking like the Raiders are going to see it out. They're even starting to try to get the ball into the corners and run the clock a little bit. And one last play from two seniors, Max Degiansky for Lambert, gets around the right side, puts in a cross, it takes a deflection, and Santino Barrio Nuevo hits a volley that will maybe be the best goal that he ever scores in his life. Puts it into the far side netting. That makes it 3-3 with about 70 seconds left. Goes to overtime. Neither team can find the breakthrough, and Lambert in the shootout was perfect. 5 for 5. They get the win, and heartbreaking for Walton, but such a night for Forsyth County on the boys and the girls side.
100%. And I think this article says Lambert was up there as, I think, the number 2 team in the nation on max preps. That goes basically off of strength of schedule and just the results. But I was looking at Class 6A, and I think it's true in all the sports. I mean, that is one of the most exciting classifications to watch. It got so much better. You got teams like Marist, Blessed Trinity coming in there. Really competitive all around. Roswell gets the girls' state title, and then the Lassiter boys looks like they had a really strong playoff run. Did anything stand out with those two particular teams?
Yeah, I had a chance to see Roswell in I think it was the quarterfinal at River Ridge. Roswell was the 4 seed out of the region.
Right.
So to get through a state tournament where you're playing every game on the road until the final is just unbelievable. And it's a credit to the leadership in that team to be able to do that. They were really good in that match at River Ridge against a good River Ridge side. And Roswell controlled the game. They had it the whole way. Lassiter, I saw them earlier in the season. I called their state final last year. They got better. I saw them against Sequoia, and they were better this year with maybe less star power, It was a little bit more of a complete team. I definitely want to go back and check on them in that final. I didn't get a chance to watch it because, from what I saw from them earlier, they were right there with Johnson in terms of overall impressiveness as a team this season. Lassiter to be able to go back to back, I mean, you know how hard that is to do in any sport in this state. But to be able to do that in 6A, which got more difficult this year with the reclassifications, I felt like 6A and 5A were the most competitive across the board. On the 5A side, I mean, you had McIntosh lead the way the whole season long, and then Midtown upset them in the quarterfinals. Dalton was right behind McIntosh, lost to McIntosh earlier in the season. They win the state title over Midtown, which was one of the best games I've called this year. And the girls' side was super competitive as well in 5A beyond Chambly. Like, Chambly is a monster. That team, maybe the best girls' high school team the state's ever seen. They were that good. And when you have players like you were talking about in the intro going to play potentially in a World Cup this summer for Jamaica and Soleil Washington, her sister's another one to watch as well. Alessandra, the sophomore, was really good in the final, although she might have suffered a knee injury, might keep her out for a little while. Chambly was on another planet in terms of 5A girls, but beyond that, it was super competitive. 5A and 6A were just so compelling to me all season long.
Yeah, and the Marist girls, they were able to tie Chambly. I was looking at their goal differential this season. It was insane. It was like 156 to like 8 or something like that. And you mentioned us, Soleil Washington, only a junior, scores 4 goals in the state championship. Yeah, so you're saying that Chambly team, I mean, how good are they going to be next year?
Yeah, that's the thing is they didn't really have that many seniors in this group. That's what was so crazy about it. It's just so impressive to see a team with this much talent and to be able to attack through so many different phases of play. Kara Kroon also incredible with that team. And I got to give a shout out to Greenbrier as well. Getting to the state final, they only conceded 4 goals all year. Greenbrier, they were 19-0 coming into that final. But when you look at Chambly's schedule, they played everybody. I mean, the draw with Marist was the only blemish on their record, but they were playing top teams out of 7A. They beat Buford during the year. They were playing top teams out of 6A. Of course, everybody in 5A. They played everybody all over the state and beat everybody except for Marist in that one game. Greenbrier came in with maybe a different level of competition during the season, and that's a team that's really young as well. And I'd love to see them be able to get some tougher games along the way next year because they've got a lot of talent that can come back. I think the thing about Greenbrier that stood out to me, and I called that game with Jessica Charman, who does radio for Charlotte FC and played at Clayton State and coached down at Trinity Christian this year. We were both just marveled by Greenbrier going up against this behemoth in Chambly and struggling to keep up. But they never quit. You never saw the heads drop. You never saw them let up. They were fighting to try to get on the board. Even at 8-0 down, they're still fighting to try to find a goal. They kept it from getting to 10-0. This is a Greenbrier team that I was, in a 9-0 loss, was really impressed with. So I hope that we see them come back. And I think the biggest thing for them and for teams like that, because there's a bunch of them around the state that are starting to pop up and make some noise, it's that next level of competition during the season. If they're in a weaker region, I think you really have to go out and get some games with top teams early in the year as a test, as that measuring stick, and as that thing that you can point back to. So when you get deep into the tournament like this, you have that feeling of having been there before. Chambly might be beyond anybody, and that just is what it is right now. But you've got to get some of those tests during the season to be able to handle that next level of competition. And I think Greenbrier will do that next year.
Yep, and they're representing the Augusta area. I mean, I know we're going to be shouting from the rooftops. I definitely want to see that Chambly team play in person next year.
Yeah.
Soleil Washington, I think she averaged like 2.2 goals per game this entire season against that really difficult schedule. And then What's it called when you get 4 goals in soccer? Is that a haul?
Yeah, it's we have to make up terms for that. It doesn't happen every day, and when you do it in a state final, forget it, forget it. She was incredible in that match.
Yeah, that's amazing. And then yeah, her sister scored as well. So 5 goals from that duo. And then you mentioned Dalton's win over Midtown. I thought Midtown boys and girls this year was a really strong program. Dalton, they've been a staple as well. They come out on top with the state title. What did you see overall from them just competing in that tough 5A?
Yeah, Dalton improved as the year went on. I saw them early down in Peachtree City against McIntosh, and they struggled in that one with the physicality from the Chiefs. Long throw, set pieces. McIntosh dominated that game. It was a 4-1 win for the Chiefs. And Dalton, I think, learned from that, and they stayed right behind McIntosh all year long in the rankings and took care of their business in that tough area up there. I mean, I think Dalton, outside of the region, the Soccer City Cup is a big deal in Dalton with Coahulla Creek, who won the 3A title. Their only loss of the year was to Dalton. The 4A powerhouses in Southeast Whitfield and Northwest Whitfield, they played in a state championship game last year. I mean, those teams beat each other up all season long, but it's that competition, and they get better. I watched Dalton on NFHS. They were trailing to Northwest Whitfield late, I think with about 5 minutes left, and came back to win that. And it felt like that was maybe the turning point for them. They did have a big test in the state tournament. Chambly's boys, who came out of nowhere to make a little bit of a run in the state tournament, they gave Dalton everything they could handle in the quarterfinals. Catamounts got through that. And they get to this final against Midtown, who no one really saw coming on the boys' side. They upset McIntosh at home in the quarterfinal. Really frustrated McIntosh. Defended those set pieces, those long throws really well. They get to the semis. They have to go on the road. They win that. And I had seen Midtown in the round of 16 against Clark Central on the boys' side, and I watched their girls beat Jefferson in the round of 16. The boys, I thought they could hang with Dalton, but I wasn't sure for how long. And the work that team, led by Jaime Benedetti, put out in that game, I mean, when you see a team in overtime with multiple players cramping up, I mean, they have given everything that they possibly have. And it took a golazo from Luis Favela early in overtime to break that game open. It was level through the full 80 minutes. It could have went either way. Midtown had their opportunities. The two Johnson brothers up top, Hudson off the bench, and Lathan as the number 9. Really impressive. JP Stiding was really impressive for Midtown. That was such a good team and team performance in the final. But Dalton is Dalton. And when you've got sophomores like Favela scoring a brace in the final, you've got a senior like Ezekiel Ortiz, who's one of the best players in the state, leading the way. And I think Dalton's best player might be their right back, Christopher Lopez, who is a sophomore, but he plays and he has the mannerisms of a senior. He's a leader in that group, and they really feed off of his energy when he gets forward, when he takes set pieces. Lopez was really good in this game. And again, credit to Dalton for having to play with a young goalkeeper in Meza, who replaced their senior, Soria. Soria got a red card in the quarterfinal against Chambly, so he was suspended for 2 games, missed the final. And Meza made a massive save pretty late in that game against Midtown to send it to overtime. When you have guys stepping up off the bench like that, it's a testament to the program that Matt Cheeves has built at Dalton, their 7th state title. This is the powerhouse that everyone talks about. And when you look at that region in general with Dalton, that area of the state, that region of the state, not region in the classifications, when you look at Dalton, Southeast, Northwest, Coahulla Creek, Dalton Academy, Christian Heritage, who won a state title this year as well, it's powerhouses all over on the boys' side. And don't sleep on the girls from that area either. I think Northwest had a great year this year. Southeast was really competitive. Dalton's girls were good. The girls' game is really growing, and that's kind of the next level for Northwest Georgia, is when you get those girls programs in the areas where the boys have traditionally dominated. When you get the girls programs up to the same area, watch out, and it's coming from Northwest Georgia for sure.
Yeah, that is something that I think is unique to soccer. Some areas will be dominant on the boys' side or more dominant on the girls' side, but you're saying it's all kind of coming together in that area. And then that game in itself, Dalton and Midtown, looks like it was phenomenal. Midtown's defense wasn't allowing many goals throughout the playoffs. They had that big win over McIntosh, a shutout. That one goes into overtime, and it looks like eventually just that Dalton experience, and they kind of broke the dam at the end with their sophomore Luis Favela. So
Yeah, moment
well
of
fought.
individual brilliance.
Yeah,
Yeah, Favela has that just moment of individual brilliance, and that's all it was going to take in a game like that because, Midtown's defense, as you mentioned, when you get a clean sheet against McIntosh and then go on the road in the semifinal against Centennial and get another clean sheet and then keep Dalton off the board for 80 minutes and send it to overtime, that's a credit to that group and their goalkeeper, who's a sophomore, Crop, really big performance. He made a couple of saves that I have no idea how he made the save. But such an impressive team performance from Midtown. They will be back. And the girls' side, and you mentioned them as well before, and I didn't get to talk about them. I want to give them a shout-out because when I saw them against Jefferson, that was one of the better games that I called this year on the girls' side in the round of 16. Jefferson was a state finalist last year. Incredible talent coming out of Jefferson. But Midtown's girls, they had lost 2 key players to injury in the weeks before, and they were able to grind out that win and keep advancing. They weren't able to eventually get to the final. I would have loved to have seen a Midtown at full strength get back to another state championship game and have another crack at Chamblee. They lost last year in the state final game, and we know the rules violations, title ends up getting vacated. But I would have liked to have seen a Midtown at full strength get another shot at Chamblee. That would have been a fascinating final. Injuries just ultimately, I think, derailed it.
for sure. And then what do you think the overall difference is just with the classifications in these teams? Um, like, how would you compare how 7A overall, 6A overall stacks up? Would you say it's not as big of a gap overall as we might see in some other sports?
Yeah, I don't think it's a big gap, honestly. It was something that struck me throughout the year following it and talking about these teams and keeping up with results. I feel like even, go down on the lower side of the classifications with 1A through 3A, I don't think there's a huge difference between the best of the best. And same with 4A through 7A. I think, you're starting to see like maybe that separation in the middle of the classifications. Maybe that's the gap. Although there's some smaller teams that can absolutely play with the bigger teams. They have the talent. And I think from what I've seen since calling these state final games since 2017, I feel like the biggest jump has been in the smaller classifications and the level of play. Felt like maybe a few years ago it'd be 1 player, 2 players on those teams that would carry the play in the match and dominate the game and carry teams. And now it's good soccer. Both of the 1A games that I called, Mount Vernon beating Paideia on the girls' side, Paideia winning in penalties over Atlanta International on the boys' side, both were really good games. And that maybe wouldn't have been the case 4 or 5 years ago. So the overall level across the state has grown, and I think what's happening is what you want, in that it's not growing in just the elite programs and they're moving further away from the rest of the group. I think what's happening in Georgia soccer is you're getting growth from the bottom up. So of course the top teams are improving, but everybody else is getting closer to them. So you're getting more competitiveness. You're always going to have those special groups that come together like Chamblee's girls this year. I really think they might be the best girls high school team ever in the state. But Dalton, as good as they were, they didn't dominate all season long. Lassiter, as good as they were, they had their issues, and they slipped up at times. Johnson's really the only one on the boys' side who didn't really slip up. They went to Dalton and they won on the road. They beat Gainesville locally. They get through and they win that state title. It's the level of competition across the board is so strong, and I think you could put 5A, 6A, and 7A, and take the semifinalists on the boys and the girls sides, and it's not going to be 7A that's just going to walk away with it. Honestly, I think if you take 5, 6, and 7, Chambly probably wins the girls, and on the boys' side, man, that's a game I would like to see. Lambert, Dalton, Lassiter, throw one more in there, maybe Midtown. Walton, any of them. I mean, you take a Final Four with that, and you pull them out of a hat, see what matchups we get. Ooh, I'd pay to see that.
Absolutely. And I think you're right, though, about it growing from the bottom up. I mean, I was looking at a few years ago. Soccer is no secret. It's been dominated by the Atlanta schools. We saw Thomasville on the boys' side win a state title, bring that to South
That was
Georgia.
a great game, by the way.
Yep.
I remember calling that game. That's one. It's funny, like doing these state finals. I mean, when I got the opportunity to call Atlanta United, and I got a few games under my belt, the first time I reached out to try to get more games to call was to the GHSA, because I played in high school at Eagles Landing. I know how much those games meant to me, and I wanted to be able to pass that on, and you know, whatever cachet you have from being with Atlanta United, I wanted to pass that on. And there's certain games that stick with me. I always love the underdog stories. I love the stories of the game growing around the state. And that Thomasville Union County, I think it was 2A at the time, state final, was one of the most fun games I've called, because Thomasville had a very specific way of playing. Union County was completely different. Total possession style. I mean, they looked like a Spanish team. It was so cool to see the way that they played. They didn't have the athletes, but they could knock the ball around all day. So it was a really cool clash of styles and just a great match down at Mercer. And that's one that has stuck with me. It's funny, like the growth when we talk about it, that game and the 1A public girls final last year with Commerce and Social Circle, those are like the two games that stick with me the most from calling high school games. And it's the smaller classifications because of that growth. And maybe it's a little bit of the surprise at the level, but it's the growth of the game and these talents popping up all over the place, and sometimes in places that you don't expect.
Absolutely. And then you've been to some of the biggest games during the regular season and state championships. What did you think of the overall just crowd participation and just how you see that potentially growing into the future?
It's growing so well, and it's such a cool thing. And I think having a high-level professional team helps with that. When I hear, students do chants from Atlanta United games and convert it for their school, that always makes me feel great. Got kind of lucky this year with Mercer's lacrosse team getting to host the conference tournament, that the Thursday and Friday games that were going to be in Macon got moved to Duluth. Made it a little bit easier for the Dalton crowd to travel, and they definitely traveled. Obviously, Midtown as well. It's a little bit closer trip for them. The Forsyth County schools. Both of those games were great, but I don't want to take anything away from the folks who traveled down to Macon. And these were not short trips. Coahulla Creek, they were loud and intense in that 3A game. Oconee County, the 1A schools. I mean, Mount Vernon and Paideia, that game had an atmosphere to it. It was really cool to see. Atlanta International, they traveled in numbers. So the growth of that side of it. And, when I can pull up the goal. So this will tell you what you need to know about how the crowds are growing. So when we're leaving Fort Lauderdale Saturday night after the Atlanta United Inter Miami game, and we're on the bus heading to the airport, and I can pull up the goal that Luis Favela scored and the whole clip of where he runs over to the crowd, and you see the crowd going nuts, and the pan across where it looks like the whole place is full. And I can pull that clip up and show it to Atlanta United's president, Garth Lagerway, and see, look at this. This is what's happening on the high school game. And he's impressed. That tells you all you need to know. It's growing. The girls' game is growing maybe at even an even faster clip than the boys. A little more room to grow, and it needs it. But it's just amazing that it's getting to a point where you might have a state championship player, a junior, play in a World Cup this summer for Jamaica. You've got players getting called up to youth national teams on the boys and the girls side all over the state. You've got more players than ever before getting a chance to go to college and play at the next level. And you've got players from all over the state signing professional contracts. Columbus High School had a grad who plays for Birmingham Legion as an 18-year-old, went pro, skipped the college route. You've got players from Dalton who are playing for Chattanooga FC right now. It's amazing to see, and it's just the sky's the limit for high school soccer in the state of Georgia. I don't think we're anywhere near where that ceiling is.
I completely agree with that. And yeah, I just think looking at these championship results, seeing how many underclassmen there were making all these big plays, the type of season we can expect next year, the fact that soccer is becoming pretty much year round down in Georgia. Atlanta United is just in the thick of it, so that excitement's going to keep building. But what is your take just on next season? How do we get ahead of it and kind of highlight these big games, besides obviously following your great work and your podcast, everything you're doing to promote it statewide? But what do you think the biggest key is just at the GHSA level to kind of relay the message to the fans and show them kind of who's coming back, who had the best season, and kind of organizing that bigger picture?
I think it's the same thing that I tell people when we talk about MLS and Atlanta United. And, if you haven't grown up with soccer, I get it. I understand. I was the weird kid in the late 80s who found soccer and was trying to find more of it in the Atlanta area then. And there wasn't any, and I was ahead of that curve at that time because I just got lucky and found it, and it changed my life. But there's no reason to be maybe just intimidated by getting into soccer and talking about soccer. It's a sport just like the rest, and I think the stories are the same. Just like we cover high school football, high school basketball, high school baseball gets great coverage. Soccer can be the exact same, and the storylines are the exact same. It's who's coming back, it's who moved on to the next level, coaching changes, how that could change things. The rivalries, and I think the rivalries are a massive part of it. It's a huge part of what we talk about on the high school football side and basketball side, and it's there for soccer. I mentioned the Dalton area schools. Johnson and Gainesville is a great one. There's so many. I mean, you can get into the Marist and St. Pius and Westminster games, and you've got rivalries going back decades there. It's huge, and I think to have more local coverage, and I was really happy to see some of the local newspapers around the state jump in with both feet and cover their teams who are making runs. I guess the message that I would give to anybody who is covering high school sports in Georgia is don't be intimidated about jumping in and covering soccer. Don't worry about terminology. I think that's always been something that when I've talked to folks, they're afraid of saying the wrong thing and getting yelled at. Anybody who is yelling about if you call it a field or a pitch or overtime or extra time or any of those things, they're not worth listening to. The game is the game, and it's all synonyms for the same thing. It doesn't matter about that, and that will come with time. But the stories of these young athletes and the moments that you get in following high school soccer, it is some of the most rewarding things that I do every year. And every year when the state final dates are announced, it is something that I look forward to. It's a busy week. I mean, this week I did 10 games from Tuesday to Sunday. I did the 8 state championship games, flew to Fort Lauderdale on Saturday, did the Atlanta United match, flew back, did a Georgia Storm match over in Carrollton, summer league team last night. So it's worth it. And if you're a sports editor, if you're local TV, it is worth it. and you will get the reward in terms of the hits on your site, the reads, the listens, the views. You will get the reward of it if you cover high school soccer, just like you cover the rest of the high school sports. And I think the girls' game is another huge area of growth, and you've seen it across women's professional sports. The numbers are growing so fast they can't keep up, and it's the same with girls' high school soccer in the state of Georgia. It could end up, and it might be now. I don't know. I'd have to compare numbers, and it'd be an interesting comparison. It might end up being the biggest girls' high school sport, and if it's not now, it's gonna be, I think, very soon. And that's another element to this is you just have so many stories to cover, and I hope that it continues to grow. I think it did this year, and I think it will continue to over the years, but don't be intimidated by it. People want the coverage. People will appreciate the coverage, and it's a huge area of growth. It's a good business decision, you know? I mean, just flat out. Like, it's a good business decision to cover soccer, and I think if you do, you're going to get rewarded for it.
For sure. I mean, it was an outstanding season. I also think it's a good thing being in the second year of this current reclassification cycle. We're going to know the storylines. We see who matched up. You have that context to add to it. And, yeah, I really think just the combination of great matchups and star power is there for sure. So, Jason, thank you so much. We look forward to just the work you do all the time covering soccer, promoting the sport, and maybe we need to get a display in Mercedes-Benz Stadium of these soccer state champions. It can go next to the football ones. What do you think about that?
I'm down to start lobbying for that. I'm absolutely down to start lobbying for that. I think there is a ton of history across Georgia high school soccer that maybe hasn't been told in the most full way, and I think it's something that we can all start to work on and grow for sure.
Yeah, that would be fun. Well, Jason, thank you so much for coming on. It's always a pleasure. Best of luck moving forward and covering all these games.
Absolutely. I'll try to rest my voice when I can.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much. And, yeah, that's just one of those guests. He's obviously a professional commentator, but what a wealth of knowledge. My goodness. He is really an MVP in terms of promoting soccer in the state of Georgia. I really enjoyed that, and I'm just blown away with all these underclassmen that he was talking about. Dalton, you have a sophomore forward, Luis Favela, stepping up. The game needs someone to just spark that special play, and the sophomore in an overtime game comes up with 2 goals to give Dalton their 7th state title. Truly incredible. I'm going to be looking on Twitter to see if I can get some of these highlights, and when we come on and do a show later this week, might try to bring them up. But the other thing he said that I thought was important was that Chambly may perhaps be the best girls team to ever come through the state. That is quite a statement. You win 9-0 in the championship. That's pretty significant. And then the fact is they're going to have pretty much all of those girls returning next year. So that will be really exciting. And then even a team like Greenbrier, they go 19-0, match up with Chambly, but now they have that experience and can learn from it, prepare in the off season, and make another run next year. So great stuff. But, yeah, let's go ahead and take a quick break and thank our sponsor, Georgia Farm Bureau.
Our mission has always been to support Georgia farmers. That's why we created Georgia Farm Bureau Mutual Insurance Company, providing financial protection that farmers needed. While this remains the same today, we've grown to protect all Georgians through home, auto, and life insurance. From the very beginning and into the future, we stand for every Georgia community.
We are our Farm Bureau.
All right, welcome back. Let's just do some quick updates on the playoff brackets, starting with baseball. So Lowndes, the number 1 seed out of Region 1, they are coming off a 3-game win over North Gwinnett. I thought North Gwinnett was a tremendous team this year. They also came off a 3-game series win in the second round but Lowndes closed out Game 3 9-3. They're going to play North Paulding in the semifinals, and that will be on Wednesday. North Paulding had a 2-game sweep over Walton. They won 4-2 Game 1 and then 2-1 in Game 2, and that was the only sweep we saw in the quarterfinals in 7A. Mill Creek beat Hillgrove in 3 games, and then Parkview, the number 1 ranked team in, I believe, the state right now, they held off Decula in 3 games, 8-7. A dramatic series for sure, and you got to think a championship favorite like Parkview getting that big emotional win in the semifinals with their backs up against the wall. That is a huge way to get to the semis. They're going to play Mill Creek next. In Class 6A, Houston County, they survived a 3-game series against Blessed Trinity, won 6-1. They have so much depth in their pitching rotation. They're going to be hard to beat in that 3-game series, but Blessed Trinity did give them a run. They're going to play Etowah next. Etowah has had a lot of tremendous seasons, and they've been on a roll this year. I think they might have made it to the finals last year. You have River Ridge beating Woodward Academy in 3 games, and they're going to play Pope after Pope was able to sweep Tift County. Pope is the defending 6A state champs, and they beat the defending 7A state champs Woodstock in the second round. All right, so we have some Game 3s to look forward to in Class 5A. They played the first games of their series on Saturday, so they've had that 1-day break. Centennial is the only team so far that has advanced. They swept Decatur, and then today we're going to get at 6 o'clock, it's going to be McIntosh against Winder Barrow. At 5 o'clock, on the other side of the bracket, Cartersville against Greenbrier, and then Loganville against Locust Grove. Those are some big-time series and Game 3s. In Class 4A, Stars Mill is going to play North Oconee, the number 1 ranked team, and then LaGrange. Now we're talking about how good they've been as the top seed out of that stacked Region 4. They are awaiting the winner of Wayne County and Lovett. That will be at 5 o'clock today. In Class 3A, Harlem has advanced to the semifinals. They'll play Pike County. That will be this weekend. And then we have 2 Game 3s today. It's going to be Savannah Christian against North Oconee, and then Columbus against Ringgold. Both of those will start at 5 o'clock. In Class 2A, Mount Perrin is going to play Fellowship Christian in the semis, and North Cobb Christian is going to play the winner of Appling County and Redan. That's going to be at 4 o'clock today. Then Class A Division 1 and Class A Division 2 is not in the semis yet. They're still 1 round behind, but it's going to be Kings Ridge against Irwin County. That's going to be on Wednesday, Games 1 and 2. Social Circle and Bleckley County, Heard County against Darlington, and Metter against Prince Avenue Christian. That's Class A Division 1. And then Class A Division 2, Bowden is going to host McIntosh County Academy. Washington Wilkes against Charlton County. Schley County against Wilcox County. And ECI is going to host Towns County. Trying to see if there are any big upsets in the latest round. Looks like all the games. Okay, McIntosh County Academy and Towns County won their series in 3 games. All the other ones were sweeps. Charlton County was dominant, 15-0, 12-2. And then Washington Wilkes, their opponent, 3-2 and 13-1 victories. Bowden also dominant over Georgia Military, outscoring them 18-1 in that sweep. So there you have it for the baseball matchups. Got some Game 3s today, and then the Class A Division 1 and 2 will start their quarterfinals on Wednesday. Let's go to lacrosse real quick. All right, so on the boys' side, these are going to be played, it says May 8th through 10th. We're going to have South Forsyth against Lambert. West Forsyth is still in it after their win over North Paulding. They're having a historic season, and they're going to play Buford. That's a rematch, if I recall. Didn't Buford beat West Forsyth? Yeah. So it's been a really intriguing season in 7A. West Forsyth beat Lambert, but then lost to Buford. That was shortly after, so that was obviously in the kind of heart of their gauntlet of a schedule. And now they face Buford on the road. That would be a huge matchup. In 5A through 6A, it's going to be Marist at Allatoona and Cambridge at Roswell. Roswell has been on an absolute tear this season. Anytime I'm talking lacrosse in Georgia, people are like, this Roswell team is the real deal. So we'll see if they are able to take it this year. Class A through 4A, Westminster at Wesleyan, Stars Mill at Lovett. Let's look at the girls real quick. Walton is going to play Milton on the road. That is tremendous matchup. No one's been able to take down Milton this year, and only a few times in the history of the sport. And then West Forsyth is going to play North Paulding in the 5A, 6A. Cambridge is going to host Roswell, and then Creekview and Blessed Trinity. Creekview is the defending state champs. That's going to be either today or tomorrow. And then in Class A through 4A, it's going to be Westminster and Wesleyan, and Fellowship Christian is going to go to Pace Academy. Some exciting matchups to look forward to there. And then we will have the Track and Field State Championships this week. And I have my blog that is posted today, but there were some exciting results. One of the sectionals I was focused on was the Class 6AB, because I knew Hughes was going to have a lot of opportunities to qualify athletes to the state championships. I'm looking at the relay team right now so I get an official score, but that was Jaden Barnes, sophomore Maurice Gleaton, who's had a tremendous year, Dorian Page, and CJ Lockhart. They clocked a 40-second.63 finish in the 4x100 relay, and that set the all-time meet record. It's their fastest time of the season, and they have a chance to basically post the fastest relay time out of all the classifications, and that was a really big result. North Atlanta's team finished in second in that event, Noonan and then Rome in fourth. One sec. Let's look at the 7A ones real quick. All right, here we go. This was the sectional B held at Archer, and I'm pulling up specifically the boys 300-meter hurdles. Let's see. And yeah, this was why I found it interesting. So we've been talking about Bryce Dobson this year and how he's posted, I think, the second fastest time in the 300-meter hurdles. His senior teammate actually beat him, Joshua Crum. He ran a 37.77. That's a USA top 50 time. Bryce Dobson was just split seconds behind him, 38.15, also a USA top 50 time. So that's significant. Brookwood has a chance to crowd the podium in that event and potentially have a gold and silver finish. That's huge. That will give them a ton of points in the overall team standing. So that's a huge accomplishment for them. But then you look also who finished third, who finished fourth. Two Grayson teammates not far behind them. They're obviously going to qualify too. So that's huge for the depth at state this weekend. That was Navin McCoy and Sean Dyer. So you don't see that too often, two teammates finishing first and second. But Brookwood has a chance to, there'll be an exciting event for sure, the 300-meter hurdles with those two guys. But that will be this weekend. We'll have more storylines to follow. Let's look at the 7A. Let's see who came out on top in the 100-meter dash. Here we go. And Dwight Phillips, he did it again, a 10.32 to finish first. He's the junior from Pebblebrook, committed to UGA. I believe his previous time was a 10.31, so he's right at that. That was the fastest time in the state. You had Deontay Cole of Camden County finishing second with a personal record in Georgia Top 25 time of 10.57. So that was in the sectional A. Let's look at the sectional B and see who's going to be Dwight's top competition. All right, and the sectional A was held at Carrollton this weekend. So Dwight ran that 10.32. And the fastest time at this sectional, hold up one sec. All right, Chris Nelson of South Forsyth at 10.52. And that was the second fastest time, so no one's been able to top Dwight, but there is going to be, I think that's 6 individuals in that event that have broken the 10.65 mark, so that's going to be a really exciting finish. For sure, Buford had Jeremiah Colbert and Osiris Gilbert both finish in the top 4. But Chris Nelson, Dwight Phillips, that will be a good head-to-head to watch. But go to the AJC, you'll check out the blog. I'll have some more of the head-to-heads right there. But that's it for today. I want to thank Jason Longshore for coming on, breaking down the soccer state championships and 2023 season. We'll be back tomorrow at noon with underrated and overlooked, get into some high school stuff, talk some NBA, college, and perhaps even some exclusive interviews with the XFL championships coming up. But also go to the Score Atlanta YouTube page and scoreatl.com, and be sure to follow tonight's playoff games. We'll see you then.